Ave Patricians, Anthony Cerise here of Soar Interactive, and I'm really excited to show a new devlog video for the game we're working on, Nova Patria. If this is your first time, Nova Patria is a simulation strategy game. It's set in an alternate history where the Roman Empire never fell, but instead lived on to colonize the New World and discover steam technology. We have several new features to showcase, and I will show them throughout the course of the video as I do a playthrough of the game in its current state. One of the major features to comment on is just all of the new art assets that are incorporated into the game. There's new art being added every day, and with each new addition the game is just looking better and better. So you can see that now with the view of the world currently, but as we play the game you'll also see a lot of new building assets, network assets, and vehicle assets. In this game there are several features that we want to look for our first city. So first and foremost, it is a hard requirement that we need fresh water in order to build our city center, and then we also need to be on the ocean coast. So if we use this heat map here, you can see that really limits our first city center to be placed somewhere on a river that feeds into an ocean. But you see that does give us several options. What we really want to be looking for is access to some good forest tiles, and then also an opportunity to branch off into a lake. That's really going to help us in the beginning game, both getting the resources that we need for our various houses, but also giving us a lot of opportunities for expansion. So with that said, on this procedurally generated map, it really comes down to this river or this river over here. And I'm leaning this river. I really like that this spring here gives us a nice springboard into this forest, whereas this forest is a little bit out in the open and requires an aqueduct to be kind of built out in this direction, which may be a bit of a wasted spring. So I think I'm gonna go over here. So let's build our first city center right here, and then now we're prompted to build our merchant dock. This is really the only location we can build it. It must be built within the city borders. It needs access to fresh water, and this is the only tile that has access to fresh water from this river. So we're gonna place that there, and you can see we're presented with a tutorial window. I'm gonna go ahead and close out of that. We do not need a tutorial. And then you can also see, if you've been following this devlog series, these toolbar buttons pop up as soon as the setup phase is done. That's pretty normal, that's usual, but we also have a brand new button here at the very top that drop down. This is the tech tree, and I'm going to hold off from showing this at the moment. I'm going to wait until we are ready to build a monastery, but just sit tight. There is a new tech tree. That is the biggest new feature of this devlog, and I will be showing that shortly. To start the game, we'll want to unpause time over here. And with time unpaused, you can see we have our first merchant ship making its first delivery to our merchant dock. And by default, we import fish, lumber, and cement. These are really important resources for the early game. So by default, we just have them automatically selected. And you can also see by default that we have them selected all for importing from overseas. With these unchecked, these resources would only flow between local merchant docks and warehouses within your colony. So with these checked, you could determine whether you want to do overseas trade with these resources or if you just want to keep it domestic. A fish is important because that is the resource that our tier 1 houses require, and we need to satisfy the various houses in our colony with their required resources in order to grow the population in their respective cities. So you can see here, this city, our first city, has a population of 2, and it has 1 house with a second house being constructed. And in fact, the second house just finished construction, and you can see that the second house is undersupplied. Well, there we go again. The second house now has fish, so now it is supplied. And with that house supplied, you can see that the population is now growing. Once it fully grows here, it'll reach a population of 3, at which point a third house construction will begin automatically. So you can see this house requires lumber in order to be constructed. Every building and structure in the game, every network, requires some resource or some combination of resources in order to be constructed. And all of those resources can be built domestically, or you can import them from overseas. You can see here the resources are making their way. We also need this cement in order to build these roads that are constructed automatically around buildings. We can also build roads ourselves to connect our buildings to each other. We'll have individual bridge assets later. But with that bridge built, you can see these resources are moving much quicker to where they need to go. As we build houses in our cities, that also opens up the opportunity to build buildings. Currently, this city center only has one building of the 3 that are allowed from the 3 houses in the city. And that building is this merchant dock. Since we have 3 houses, or about to be 4 houses, that require fish, it's a good idea for us to build a fishing dock. I'm going to build it right here. And you can see as we initiate this construction, those resources automatically left where they were stored in the warehouse, or the merchant dock rather. But merchant docks, they operate very similar to warehouses, the only exception being they have the option to import and export overseas. But merchant docks and warehouses, their primary function is to store resources and to release them onto the world when they're needed. And the distance in which resources can travel on their own is determined by hovering over buildings. You can see that. So this is the distance that resources can travel on their own. In order to get resources beyond this, we're going to need to build more cities and more warehouses to extend that range. And later in the game, we're going to need to build transportation networks, like roads and rail. And you may have noticed that the trees are changing color. That's because it's autumn. So another feature that has been added to this game is seasons. And these changing trees not only give the player a sense of the time that is progressing as they play the game. If we hover over the time panel here, you can see we've been playing for about a half of the year of in-game time. But they also affect some gameplay. So as you can see here, as we build this wheat farm, we will get a penalty to the production of all farms depending on the season. So if it's autumn, we'll get a mild penalty, and if it's winter, we'll get a harsher penalty. That penalty can be negated with a tech that's in the tech tree. We'll discuss that in a little bit. With this farm built, if we click on it here and hover, you can see that we have an autumn penalty that is adding 7.2 hours or 10% to the production time. During winter, it'll be even harsher. It'll be a 25% penalty. Now that we have a good city here built and we got some good wheat production, I'm actually going to up that wheat production up a little bit more. It's a good time to build a second city. The reason we want to build our second city here is because we want to produce flour with all this wheat. And flour is an important resource for our tier 2 houses. And if we click here, you can see we have tier 2 houses already. We can see that it doesn't have the flour that it needs. And if we hover over here on undersupplied, you can see that this is actually affecting our tax revenue for this house pretty drastically. It's reduced by 75%. So it's important to give the houses in our colony the resources they require, not just so that we can grow the population in our cities, but also so that we can get as much tax revenue as we can from them, which is really important, especially in this early game. So you can see we're bleeding a little bit of money here. It'd probably be a good time right now to stop importing some lumber and cement. We have enough stockpiled, and importing both of those is really what's bleeding a lot of our money. So we'll keep importing fish since that's important and our houses require it, and I don't think this one dock right now is sufficient in order for us to sustain the growth that we're looking for. But for now, I think we can live with what's in our stockpiles for the construction resources. With our second city center built up a little bit, you can see the borders expanded, and now we have a tile available that will allow us to construct a flour mill. So as we hover over the flour mill in the construction toolbar, you can see the requirements. It requires 50 denarii and 1 lumber and 1 cement construction resources. It also requires a hill. So we'll build that right here. And then we'll connect it with a road. You can see those construction resources have been released from the merchant dock, and they're making their way over to our construction site. Before this flour mill is constructed, you can see that these wheat farms are producing wheat, but they have nowhere to send the wheat to. So you can see we're getting this plus symbol, but we're also getting this minus symbol right on top of it. And that indicates that we're producing a resource, but that resource is immediately being scrapped. And when a resource is scrapped, we get only 25% of its value. So it's really important to make sure that all the resources you're producing are either being fed into your industry, or they're making their way back to your merchant dock for export. You can see now, with the flour mill constructed, wheat is making its way over to the flour mill and it's producing flour. And once flour is produced, it gets released and it makes its way to where it's needed, which is this tier 2 house. I'm going to construct a road to move that along a little quicker. You can see that there's 4 en route, and then we already have 1 wheat delivered. And that has allowed the population to resume growth in our new city. It has also put us in the black. We're finally making money. With our 2 cities built up a bit, you can see that we can now build some additional buildings. I'm going to create a lumber industry so that we don't have to keep importing lumber from overseas, but we can also have the option to export excess lumber for additional revenue. A logging camp requires a tile that has a tree in it, and if it has additional trees, we get a production bonus. Unfortunately, it looks like we don't have any tiles that have more than 1 tree, so we'll just have to suffice with the default production. We're also going to need to build a lumber mill for those logs. We can build that over here. With the logging camp constructed, it's now sending logs over to our lumber mill. And once our lumber mill produces lumber, it sends that lumber over to our merchant dock for storage. Now you can see the throughput here isn't very efficient. There's only storage for up to 10 logs, and if there are 10 logs en route, then the logging camp won't send any more. So if there's a great distance between the logging camp and the lumber mill, it's going to slow down production. There's a couple ways we can resolve this. One way is to build a road, and once that's constructed, that will provide a quicker route from the logging camp to the lumber mill. With this bridge built, you can see logs are making their way to their destination much quicker, which results in a much more efficient industry. We can optimize it even more by creating a warehouse. And it would be even better if the warehouse was directly next to the lumber mill. So I'll go ahead and demolish this house. When you demolish a house and the city has the capacity for another house, then it'll automatically create a new house construction in another tile that has access to fresh water. So let's build this warehouse here. So now we have a new warehouse constructed. You can see by default it imports and exports domestically fish, lumber, and cement. And you can see that we have an automated trade network already created. So at the very beginning of the game, warehouses and merchant docks will create trade routes using carts. And they will distribute resources between merchant docks and various warehouses based off of the imports and export storages that are selected for each. In our new warehouse, if I want to change one of the import storages to logs, then excess logs from this production will make their way over here for storage. And then when this lumber mill needs the logs, it'll send it right over. And since it's right next door, this will result in an extremely efficient lumber industry. Warehouses are also important because they also effectively determine the range that your resources have access to. So as I mentioned earlier, when we hover over a building, we can see the range at which resources can travel to and from that building. Resources have a finite range that they can travel to on their own. So in order to extend the range of those resources, we can create a new warehouse where resources get stored, and then from there, the resources can be pushed out even further. If we go over here in the heat map menu and use the local transport option, we can see the range that all of our warehouses and merchant docks provide. So I'm taking a moment to pause the game right now, just take a look at the map and determine my next path forward. Looking at the situation, there are a couple things we want to consider moving forward. So it looks like we're running pretty low on fish, even though we're importing it. The amount of fish production we're getting from this one dock isn't enough. And unfortunately, there aren't any viable fishing dock locations available here. So we're going to need to produce more viable fishing locations. And the reason we can't build more docks, you can see our fishing docks require fresh water access. These tiles are no good. We need a coastline. So in order to build more fishing docks, here and here for instance, we would need to create an aqueduct and build that down here to provide fresh water to these tiles. You can also see hovering over these tiles with this selected, we also need more population and housing. So we would also need to scale back some of the industries that we have in this city, maybe move them over here. Another thing we want to do is extend our colony further out towards this lake. And looking again at our local transport heat map, you can see we can't really make our way out there quite yet. So this is going to require a smaller city kind of in between to kind of get us there. And this city will just have a warehouse in it to extend our range further. So I probably place that city right here, and then we can build the warehouse here. So that's the plan moving forward right now. I'm going to go ahead and get started on this aqueduct. That will allow us to produce more fish, and then that will give us the ability to extend further towards that lake. I think the best path right now is probably just to get rid of our lumber industry. We're going to need those 2 building spots for our new fishing docks. And looking at our storage, we do have a lot of lumber stockpile. This will last us for quite a bit. However, we did run out of cement just in time. There's really only one more aqueduct piece here, but we don't have enough cement to construct it, so we need to start importing cement again. You can see here that this cart is trading cement from the merchant dock here to the warehouse. Earlier, that warehouse released cement onto the map, and it made its way over to this aqueduct. And with this final piece constructed, That's going to bring fresh water all the way over to these tiles. Perfect. So let's build a couple fishing docks there, and now we should have enough fish production. With those fishing docks constructed, we'll now get enough fish production to carry our expansion into this area. And if you look here, you can see we were definitely running low on fish. A lot of our houses over here were not getting enough fish. So thankfully that will no longer be an issue. Now we can start the construction of our second aqueduct to help support our third city. One note about aqueducts is only one can be constructed per spring, so you want to be really careful and strategic about how you use each spring. While we're waiting for this third city to be constructed, I can showcase some of these filters. These can be used to toggle off various visual aspects of the game. We can toggle on and off city borders, city labels. If you want to see the isometric grid, there's the option there. And then we can also make in-game objects transparent, which can make it easier to see things that are happening behind various structures. Okay, we have a third city now, with a new house construction automatically started. With this new house constructed in our new city, we now have the option to build a warehouse. Now that this new warehouse is constructed, new trade routes will be created between this warehouse, the other warehouse, and the merchant dock. You can see that here. And with those resources available from that location, we can now build a city center on this lake. I should also mention I spent a lot of time on balancing lately. I built out an intricate spreadsheet that allows me to calculate the actual value that each building brings to the game's economy, and through careful tuning of prices and production rates, I was able to shape a challenge that scales naturally as players encounter each housing tier. So this city here, you can see, has used up all of the tiles that have access to fresh water that are provided by this aqueduct, so it can't expand further. However, if we build a fountain at the end of the aqueduct, that will further increase the amount of tiles that have access to fresh water. In order to do that, we're going to have to demolish one of these buildings. And we can't demolish the city center, obviously, then there wouldn't be a city there to construct buildings inside of. And we can't demolish one of these houses either, because that would only allow for one building to be constructed in the city, and that's already accounted for with this warehouse. So unfortunately, we're going to have to demolish this warehouse if we want to expand this city further. Now, as I demolish that warehouse, you can see all of the resources that were stored in that warehouse are being released. And if they have somewhere to go within range, they'll make their way over there. It looks like these resources are making their way over to this warehouse, and you can see that each of these import storages has a number of items en route. You can also see automatically a house construction has started in this spot where we want to construct a fountain. So I'm going to just pause time and demolish that. And we're going to go ahead and get that fountain started. And to compensate for the missing warehouse here, I'm going to go ahead and build another warehouse over here so that we can get some distribution of resources from over here into our new area by the lake. And with this new fountain constructed, you can see we now have access to fresh water and all these tiles surrounding it, allowing the city to grow even greater. With the colony built a bit, I will now demonstrate the final feature that has been implemented since the last devlog, and it's a big one, the tech tree. In order to accumulate research, to unlock technology, we need to build a monastery. Now that the city has more locations available for buildings, we can build a monastery here. With the monastery constructed, we're now producing research. And through the monastery window, we can get a sense of how this monastery is producing research. By default, each monastery produces 1 unit of research per day, but that's further modified by populi donation and imperial donation. Populi donation is determined by the number of tier 3, 4, and 5 houses that are fully supplied. Currently, in this game, we don't have any tier 3 houses that are fully supplied, so our modifier is at the minimum of 0.5. We do have a couple tier 3 houses here in our colony, but they need jerky. So now that we're producing research, it'd probably be a good idea to start importing jerky. Imperial donation is determined by how much the player decides to invest per day into research. At a minimum, with only 2 denarii invested per monastery per day, we get a 0.5 modifier. But we could get a maximum modifier of ×2 at a cost of 32 per monastery. So note that there's diminishing returns here, the more you invest. Now that we have some research points stored here, let's unlock some of these technologies by clicking on them like so. You can see that it's accumulating research points as it comes in. You can see now that our tier 3 houses have jerky, we're getting some donation from them, so the modifier is now set at 1. The populi donation can go up to ×2, just like the imperial. And to kind of slow this down a bit, and to maybe save us a little cash, I'm going to go ahead and decrease this all the way down. Right now, none of these techs are actually implemented in the game yet. Moving forward, we'll be building them out one by one as we take Nova Patria from early game vertical slice to feature complete. I should also say this tech tree isn't completely set in stone either. As we get deeper into play testing and experimentation, we'll be making adjustments, adding new techs, and refining the structure. You'll notice there are some deliberate empty spots left open for that purpose. Now I'd like to walk through some of the planned techs, just to give a sense of how the gameplay really opens up in the mid and late game, and also to show off some of the steampunk elements that have been absent due to the game being in an early vertical slice state, but that are really going to start coming into play very soon. The very first technology that opens up the entire tree is elipile engineering. And in our timeline, the Romans, they invented this device called the elipile, or the hero's engine. And the idea behind this is, at the time, it was really just a novelty item. It was something cool to show off. The Romans failed to unlock the true potential behind this device. But essentially, it was a rudimentary, very early steam engine. And the premise behind this game is the Romans discovered the true potential behind this machine and were able to kick off an entire industrial revolution. So this entire tech tree hinges on this discovery here. Starting off at the very left quadrant, we have irrigation. This loosens some of the building requirements for farms, allowing us to build them not just along rivers, but we can build them anywhere that has access to fresh water. However, if the farm is built on a river, we do get a production speed bonus for that. That feeds right into indigene farming. This is where we bring Native Americans into the game. And just like our timeline, where Native Americans taught the first settlers how to improve farm output through fertilization using fish, With this tech unlocked, farms will be able to consume fish to remove season penalties and gain a slight production boost. On the other side of irrigation is urban waterworks. Urban waterworks caps city upkeep costs. So for every population a city gains, an upkeep cost is usually added. But with this technology, it makes it so that after a population of 8 is in a city, additional population in the city doesn't add additional upkeep cost. And as you can see up here, upkeep is a pretty significant cost throughout the game. Branching off of indigene farming, we have enhanced preservation, which decreases the amount of resources that houses consume. Branching off of urban waterworks and indigene farming is water of healing. The idea here is that the Romans learn about various herbs that have healing properties from the Native Americans, and they can use those herbs in the water networks to increase the health and to purify the water, which will provide numerous bonuses throughout the city that it's in. By this point in this alternate history, the Roman slave class has been replaced by what's closer to serfs in our timeline. This technology liberates this class further, gradually upgrading all Tier 1 houses to Tier 2. On this side of the tech tree, we have Ballista Venator. This is a steam-powered, pressurized weapon that can help the hunters of this colony hunt fish and meat. And then branching from that, we have pressurized water being used to enhance the mining process. And if this sounds far-fetched, this is actually consistent with our own timeline. The Romans actually used pressurized water to mine ore. So the idea here is using pressurized water from steam technology. They're able to do that more efficiently and more effectively. Branching off of that, we have deep wells. Once that's researched, that further extends the amount of fresh water that's available from rivers. So you can see currently this river is creating freshwater tiles in all of its neighboring tiles. With this research unlocked, these freshwater tiles will extend even further, one tile further. This tech here is for the production of steel. Steel is a construction resource, just like lumber and cement, and it's required to build certain buildings, and it's also required to unlock these techs over here. Moving along to the top left of the tree, we have Horseless Chariot. This upgrades carts to steam-powered vehicles that can move faster and carry more goods. After that, we have Machina Optima, which improves the output of various industrial buildings and also improves construction by 50%. On the other side, we have Iron Reach. This allows the player to construct rail, which allows trains to trade resources between warehouses and merchant docks. Then we have an upgraded version of the train, which moves much faster with much greater capacity. We can upgrade the merchant ships so that we get better import and export prices, in addition to more goods being moved faster and at greater quantity. And then there's an airship, the Aero Arc. This is the penultimate transport vehicle in the game and allows you to move a lot of resources across the entire map. This tech here, the Timbercraft engine, greatly enhances the bonus we get from additional resources for the logging camp and the wild herb collector. So for instance, if I were to build a logging camp here, you can see it has 2 trees. Since it has 1 additional tree then is required in order to build the logging camp, that 1 additional tree gives us a boost in our production speed. So what this technology does is it enhances that boost. So if you unlock that technology and create a logging camp on a tile like this one with 5 trees, you'll get a massive production bonus. After that, we get Forge Breath, which improves the output of industry buildings that require high heat. Next up is the Aqua Motor, and this is a very cool building. I'll actually show what we have planned for this, a sketch. But the idea behind the Aqua Motor is it's a building that you place directly on a river tile, and it provides a production bonus to all surrounding tiles. The idea of how it works is it's this water engine that produces this mechanical energy that gets fed underground using gears and spinning pistons and gets fed into these neighboring buildings to help enhance their production. Lastly, branching off from the Aqua Motor and the Forged Breath is the Steam Crucible, which is essentially a coal plant. And the idea of that is it works very similarly to the Aqua Motor, except it can be built on land. It doesn't need to be built on a river. So because of that, you're able to have more buildings surrounding it. And it also provides a greater bonus, but it requires a constant supply of coal in order for that bonus to be applied. And that wraps up this devlog. Playtesting is starting very soon, so if you haven't already, make sure to join on our Discord server or sign up for the mailing list on our website. Both links below. I'll only use the mailing list to let you know about playtesting registration, when the Steam page goes live, and when the game is available. No spam beyond that. Also, make sure to subscribe to this YouTube channel to stay updated on the latest developments. As always, thank you for your interest. Things are moving along very quickly now, so it won't be long before you have a chance to play Nova Patria.